If you want to produce modern music, there's no way around synthesizers. If you're making any style of modern music, and it doesn't matter like if it's trap or hip hop or house or techno music and the various styles of electronic pop music, you will need two things: a drum machine and a synth. And with that you can produce almost any sound that you will need for that style of music. Therefore, it's very important to know how synths work, and for that reason I want to share some insights that helped me a lot to understand synths better, and now I think I can at least get the sound out of the synth that I want, and I don't have to rely so much on presets. Why would you want that? So if you open up a synth and you load any preset, then there are really awesome sounds. I think in most modern DAWs there are a lot of stock synthesizers included, and a lot of these work really well, so you don't have to buy especially this one or that one. At least that's what I think. Then you open up any of the synth and you go to the presets and load one, and a lot of these sound really great. So why should you take your time and understand the knobs and put a lot of work in it when the presets sound already that good? I think there is a few very good reasons to understand a synthesizer, at least the basic functions. The first one was always, to me, I liked the presets and the sounds, and they were way better than what I produced, so I used them, of course. Then I wanted to make a certain sound, or I wanted to produce a song, and I had a sound in my head and I didn't know how to get it. So I went to the presets and then I started listening to that, and I started to go to another one, and that wasn't it. And then in all these synthesizers there's hundreds of presets, and after like trying out 50 or 100 different ones, I didn't find the one that I wanted, and so I just used any that was maybe close or maybe not, because I was tired of searching for a different one. So sometimes that works, but sometimes I wasn't happy with the sound and I didn't know how to create it. So I took a completely different sound, and that wasn't what I wanted to hear in my tune. So my tune didn't get the sound that it needed. That's one reason. The other one was I found a preset that I liked, but there was a tiny bit I wanted to change. And then I didn't know which of all these knobs was the right one to turn to change that certain parameter. And the third one was probably the most important. You cannot get a signature sound by using the same sound than a million of other musicians. I don't want to say that you shouldn't use presets, because I really like a lot of these and they are awesome and they are maybe a good starting point, and for some songs they just would fit perfect. But sometimes if you listen to modern music producers, you would recognize their sounds, and sometimes the music isn't very interesting, but you still like to listen to that song because it has such a great sound. And good music producers, they have their own special style of sound. And that is, I think, very important, to create your own sound and not only use ideas that other people created. And that does not have to mean that the sound has to be very complicated. So if you ever watched a tutorial, for example, by David Guetta on YouTube, then you could see that sometimes what he does with a synthesizer is super easy, but he knows exactly how to create that sound that fits perfectly with his song. And then he's not using any special knowledge at all, but just these few knobs he turns create exactly that sound, and in the end you will recognize his song immediately. So therefore, like I said, I want to show you some basic insights on synthesizers. And then the next problem I had was this: if you use a synthesizer, for example the stock synthesizers in Cubase, then one looks like this and the other one maybe looks like this, or like this, and one looks like this, and then you probably have a synthesizer that is not a stock synthesizer and it looks like this. That always kind of scared me away from using synthesizers a few years ago, because there was so many different knobs, but in the end you will see that most of these knobs are the same in every synthesizer, and if you understand these, then you will probably also be able to work with other synths as well. For that reason, I want to use the Retrigger, because it's a pretty standard wavetable synthesizer and it has really cool functions. Even though at first it looks complicated, it's very good to understand, and there's mostly basic functions that you will find in that form in most other synthesizers as well. So like always, when I try to understand myself or explain something in Cubase or in DAW music production, I would at first try to get an overview over this instrument so I can find my way through it by looking at it. That was very important. At first, when I opened it, it was just confusing, but then I realized, you see, there is different sections and they are all visible like this. So on the left side, you will always find the name of a section and this light gray area. And then you see like one segment is separated from the others like this. And if you look at the Retrigger like this, you will immediately see it gets way easier, because you can find these sections everywhere. And then you know, like, these buttons belong to each other and they are for one section, and it's way less likely that you get confused. So the Retrigger has like a lot of synthesizers, different pages, and these are mostly the same. So it's like a book, like a very short book with only 3 pages. And the first page is indicated here. And that is the page that you see when you open up the synthesizer. The second page is here, and it is not exactly like, you don't have to use that page or the third one. These are additional functions and you don't have to use them. So the second one is an arpeggiator inside the synthesizer, and the last one are effects. Like, some are more special to a synth and some are really basic. And on the first page, you see that's the synthesizer. What I want to go through, not in too much detail, but so that you can understand and use it, is in this first video, the basic functions. And these are the voice panel, the main panel, and like half of the synthesizer, everything here on the left. Because with these buttons, you will see you can create a lot of really interesting and versatile sounds, and it's not very complicated. I will in a later video also explain the other side, but this is way more complicated, at least that's what I think. But that's where the sounds get really, really interesting, but it does not have to mean that it's so complicated that nobody can understand it if you're not studying or anything. If you open up this synth, you find a piano down here and you can try out your sounds, and the basic sound sounds like this, and it sounds like a cheap 80s computer game sound. And it's not very interesting, but like I said, you will see if you know a few basic things, you will be able to create a really cool sound out of these basic functions that I show right now. The voice module gives you the opportunity to make some basic changes to the way you can play the synthesizer. If you start it, it is in polyphonic mode. That you can see here, and that means you can play more than one note at the same time. So, if you use a piano and you press a key, then you can hear the sound, and if you press these together, you can hear a chord, right? So in this field, you can tell your synthesizer how many notes you want to be able to play at the same time. It goes really high. I don't know who needs that, but you can play up to 128 notes together. And the lowest is of course 2. So that means if you play 2 notes at the same time and you press a third one, then one of the other that you have pressed before gets deleted. And which one gets deleted, that you can tell here in this menu. So is it the last one you played that will sound on? Is the first one the one that will always sound on even if you press more than 2? That is in this menu. The best thing here is, I think, to try it out yourself. I don't want to get too technical here, so I'm not go through all these variations that you can find in Retrolog. The other function you will find in the voice mode is a monophonic button. If you turn on the monophonic button, then another button appears that wasn't available before. You see, if I turn it off, it is grayed out and you can't use it. If you turn it on, then Retrigger appears. You can use this function or not. That I will show in a moment. Monophonic means, of course, you can only play one note at a time. So if I do the same thing than I did before, I press one key and hold it and press another one, then the first one gets deleted immediately. You see, even if I press 3 notes, you can only hear one. Retrigger means if I press 1 and hold it down and I play a second one, then the first one will not sound anymore. But then if I let go of the second one, you will hear the first one again, so it gets re-triggered. The difference is this. I play one note and then play another one, and I let go of the second one and still press the first one, but you cannot hear anything. The first one gets not played anymore. If I use the Retrigger mode, I press 1, play another, let go of it, and you see the first one gets re-triggered, and that means I can easily play stuff like this. Because the first one gets always played again. If I let go of another key, the first one will sound again. So that is Retrigger. And one more thing that is really interesting in the voice module is the glide parameter. Glide means that there will be a glide between the first note you play and the second note you play. I will make it really obvious and turn up this glide time button. And then you can hear, if I play one note and another, the note glides up from one key to another or down. Right now the glide time is like around 500 milliseconds. The shorter I make it, the less obvious this effect is. And the longer I make it, of course, the longer it takes for the note to glide up or down. There's one more button, and it only gets active if you activate glide. That is this here, and it's called fingered. That means you see, even though I did not change anything here, I can use two different styles. So if I play my note like I did the first time, I play a note and let go of it and play another one, you cannot hear a glide. So if you make a pause, like something like a pause between two keys, there won't be a glide. But if you don't make a pause, like use a legato playing, that means you do not let go of the first one and then play the second one. Then the glide appears again. So that is what fingered does. If you deactivate that, the glide will always appear no matter how you play it. The main panel is also not that complicated, but very important because it has a great influence of your overall sound. So you can, for example, change the octaves for your overall sound. So no matter what you will put in here, that button will put your sound in a very low or very high octave. So you see on the left, I play on my piano, or you can see it down here, I play a C3. And I play always the C3 it's the same key, but one time it is very low and one time it gets really high. So that means if you want to create in general a high sounding synth, then you probably will put your whole synth in a high pitch. If you want to produce a bass sound, you probably want to do it in a lower octave. Keyfollow and random pitch are also interesting, especially if you want to produce something weird or confusing. That happens a lot in electronic music. Sometimes you want to disturb with your sound. Not always we want to have a really nice and beautiful sound. Sometimes you want to like produce a scratch on a chalkboard, and then if we stop that sound, people are really happy if the good sound comes back in. That would work especially well for like risers. So random pitch is exactly what you think it would do. If you turn that knob up, you see I play my C3 again. And I always play the same note, but it changes every time because I have random pitch activated. Keyfollow means that you can produce various different things. You see, I'm playing different keys, but I only can produce one note right at the moment. If I turn it down even more, this happens. You see, I'm playing upwards, but the keyboard is sounding downwards. So that means Keyfollow changes the way you play your keyboard. If you turn it up all the way, two notes that are right next to each other will not produce two notes that are right next to each other. They will produce a bigger jump. So Keyfollow changes the way you will be able to play your keyboard, and it goes up and down in steps, or it changes the direction, or it allows you just to play one note at a time. These two buttons are for your pitchbend wheel. Your pitchbend wheel is this, and if you play a note and turn your pitchbend wheel, you can obviously bend your note. The distance, how far you can bend your note, you can put in here in numbers, and that are half steps. So right now I can go down 3 half steps and up 3 half steps. So I can play this note and 1, 2, 3. That means if I play that key, then I have all these notes in between available. You can go up 2 octaves and down really low. That means if I play this note, the C3, I can bend it up to this note, which is the C5, and I can go down here to C-1. So that means all these notes are now available with the pitchbend wheel. And that is also interesting for creating really crazy sounds. So the last two things are a tuning function and a overall volume knob. That also works for everything you put in here. Sometimes your sounds will get really loud or really soft, and then you probably want to turn that knob up or down. Tuning is sometimes important, like if you play with a real instrument, then you probably want to check that your tuning is the same then of that instrument. But besides that, I would never touch that button unless you want to give your song a really certain feel, and then sometimes people go like, okay, it sounds way better if I tune my whole instrument a tiny bit down or up. But most of our music is made in like 440.